Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be breaking down the imperial units of measure, or what some people will refer to as the standard unit of measure. And whenever you hear someone mention imperial or standard, typically I want you to think of feet and inches. And so if we think back to the rulers that we used to use in school, they were typically 12 inches long. 12 inches makes up 1 foot. And 1 foot is the basic unit of measure. So whenever someone talks about, feet, just remember that 1 foot is the baseline. So it's the basic unit of measure. But as welders, we won't always be dealing in increments of feet. Most of the time, we're going to be dealing with increments of an inch. So we need to learn how to break down and read fractions of an inch according to various rulers and tape measures. And up top, I've got just a few inches showing of a tape measure. And the first thing that I want to point out are the bold numbers. So the bold numbers on this tape measure are telling you where the inch marks are. So it's double-sided. So if you were using this tape measure, you can stand to either side of the tape measure and you would be able to read pretty clearly where you're at in your measurement. If you haven't guessed it already, this tape measure uses the imperial unit of measure. So feet and inches. This one is breaking it down into inches. And let me actually slide it a little bit further down so you can see where the 1 foot mark is. So right there at 12 inches, you can see that it makes up 1 foot. So again, 1 foot is broken down into 12 inches. So I also have here this small ruler. It's only 6 inches long, but I'm actually going to be using this for the majority of the video because it's easier to move around. So I'm going to go ahead and get the tape measure out of the way. Now you're going to see a second set of numbers on this. So we've got inches up top. So it clearly says on the ruler inch. And if we flip this around, you're going to see that this is centimeters. So we have both the empirical rule and the metric standard of measurement on here. But I'm going to get to the metric system in a later video. For now, let's just focus on inches. So at the very edge, it's kind of hard to see because the ruler is see-through, but right here, that's where the ruler ends. So because it's a little harder to see, I'm actually going to skip over the 1 inch mark, and we're going to be dealing with this section right here. Now, just because it says the number 2, it doesn't make a difference. I'm just going to break down 1 inch. All right, so we've got our 1 inch. That's going to start right here, and it's going to end right there. So here's the end of an inch. There's the beginning of the inch. Now we see all these various sized tick marks in between, and each of them tells us that there is a different unit of measure from the inch. So if we go about the halfway mark, you see that this tick mark is pretty long, but it's not quite as long as the inch marks. So halfway, this is what everyone refers to as the half-inch mark. So 1/2. Now, if we were to break down a 1/2 inch even further, and let's just start right here and move our way this way. If we start at the halfway point, go to the beginning, and we go about halfway, we find this line that's just a little bit shorter than the 1/2 inch mark, but it's still longer than all of these other tick marks. So, half of a half is what? 1/4. So that is 1/4 of an inch. So from the very start to this tick mark is 1/4 of an inch. And then if we go 1/4 more, that gives us a 1/2 an inch. So now let's work our way from the 1/2 inch mark this way. So our halfway point, the completion of 1 inch, halfway, what do you think that is? If we're at 1/4, half, and now we're adding another quarter, what do you think that gives us? That's going to give us 3/4 of an inch. So now we know 1 inch, we know 1/2 an inch, we know 1/4 of an inch, and now we know 3/4 of an inch. So now let's break this down even smaller. And I'm going to slide down just a little bit. Let's start with the 1/4 inch mark. Okay, so just kind of draw like in a little invisible line down here. So if we just move to the halfway point, all right, again, it's a line that's just a little bit shorter than a 1/4 inch, but it's still taller than these two lines. What do you think a 1/2 of a fourth is? A 1/2 of a fourth is 1/8. So this is the 1/8 mark. So from the start to this tick mark is 1/8. So that tells us that in order to get to a 1/4 of an inch, we need to have another eighth. But we don't say that we have 2/8. We break that down and we simplify it and we say we have 1/4. So now if we add another eighth, this is going to give us 3/8. So 3/8 of an inch. Now if we add another eighth, we can say 4/8, but again, if we simplify that down, 4/8 becomes 1/2. Then if we add another eighth, this becomes 5/8. Sorry, I wrote that kind of sloppily, but 5/8 of an inch. And then 6/8 of an inch, well, that can be simplified down to 3/4 of an inch. And then we add another eighth of an inch. This is 7/8 of an inch. And then if we add another inch, well, 8/8 of an inch is actually just simplified to 1. So at 8/8 of an inch, we are at the 1 inch mark. Now, let's go even smaller. So I'm just going to drop down a little bit. Now, let's start at the 1/8 mark. All right, now we have the smallest of the tick marks. So what do you think is 1/2 of an eighth? 1/2 of an eighth is 1/16. So 1/16 of an inch. And so all these small little tick marks tell us that they are 1/16 of an inch. All right, 1/16 increments. So just the same with 1/8. If we were to add another 16th to this, that would be 2/16. But instead of saying 2/16, we simplify that down to 1/8. And then we add another 16th. This becomes 3/16. 4/16 is simplified down to 1/4 of an inch. We have 5/16, 6/16, which can be simplified to 3/8, 7/16, 8/16, which can be simplified to 1/2 an inch, and so on and so forth. So as a welder, you're just going to be required to know how a foot breaks down into 12 inches, all right, maybe how a yard breaks down to 3 feet, how an inch breaks down to 1/2 an inch, how an inch breaks down into 1/4 of an inch, how an inch breaks down to eighths of an inch, and then how an inch breaks down into sixteenths of an inch. I hope that everything in this video was easily understood. If you need some more time to bounce off some ideas and some questions off of me just to make sure that you fully grasp the concept, by all means, please reach out to me. And I'd be more than willing to spend a little bit more time with you on this topic. Other than that, let's move on to the next topic at hand.